Welcome back to Sonic Speed Reading, and welcome to Crisis City, also known as Sunset City, as Rouge explains to Sonic for some reason. What a great name. I think I'll steal that and use it for a podcast. Yeah, I know this is just here to explain what this place is and give some weight to the importance of it for the reader and, a little bit of world building here. It's cute, it's fine, it's just, I don't know why Rouge is explaining this to Sonic. I also love at the end of the page, we see some of the Zombots climbing up the side of buildings. And this shows us that nowhere is actually safe from these things, like they can just crawl up the side of buildings with ease, but they just look like they got distracted and just decided to go dink around somewhere else. It looks funny to me. I don't know. Anyway, we waste no time with the action as we see Sonic spinball his way through a horde. He's trying to make his way through this mess to find survivors, and also quickly remind the reader that the more he touches Zombots, the more his own virus spreads, so he has to be careful. And he does indeed find survivors on the upper floors of these buildings, and as we just saw, Zombots can reach them, so Sonic can't waste any time. He's got to get him out of there. But just as he's about to pave his way through some zombie boys, a rain of gunfire impedes his movement. Turns out, Omega has shown up. And if you don't know anything about Omega, he's a rogue Eggman badnik who hates Eggman and all of his badniks. To Omega, these are all Eggman robots and therefore must be eliminated. Sonic tries to explain that these are not the normal badniks. These are innocent people that have been transformed by the metal virus. And then we see one of Ian Flynn's strengths when it comes to characters. I love the way he writes Omega, because he just holds up one of these stupid Zombots and just asks Sonic, is this a robot? Sonic's kind of stuttered around like, yeah, I guess. Was this created by Eggman? Well, technically. Well, then it must be destroyed, shouldn't it? Cut and dry. I love the robots of this series. But Sonic's gonna leave him be because, as it turns out, Omega's not actually doing anything to these guys. At this point, Rouge makes contact with Sonic directly, and in turn, they start directing survivors towards the truck so they can get them out of town. They meet up at Grand Gold Flicky Hotel. Oh, I love that statue. And here, Sonic and Rouge kind of catch each other up a little bit here. Rouge points out that this assault seems a little sloppy even for Eggman standards, and Sonic points out that it's because that he's no longer controlling the Zombots. Sonic asks about Shadow's location, and Rouge responds that he's off to pick up a truck. How sweet. We then have some more survivors get to the barricade, and again, this is reminding readers that Sonic can't touch anybody, so he's got to get creative with how he deals with Zombots and saving people's lives. He runs into Omega again, asking him what he thinks he's doing. He's got to keep Zombots away from the hotel, and Omega tells him that there are too many targets, the enemies advancing from both directions. Because that's right, there's a second wave of Zombots coming in. Sonic's about ready to deal with them, but then he notices a large mass making its way through the horde. It's a semi, of course it is. And from it steps Shadow the Hedgehog, looking quite pissed. Sonic tries to sass him, and Shadow's not having any of it. Sonic tries to tell him to chill out because he was joking, and again, Shadow is just not in the mood. He points out that if he had destroyed Eggman in Windmill Village, none of this would be happening. And then I guess Sonic's trying to go for a pity because he's like, hey, I'm dealing with the infection too. And Shadow's like, you get what you deserve, bro. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, look how pissed Sonic is. He can't refute any of this. And I can't really blame Shadow for being ticked off with the guy. And you would think from here we would get an interesting dynamic between the two, but let's keep going. Sonic, realizing that this isn't the time or place to get into it with Shadow, tells him that he's gonna go take care of his infection, thanks him for bringing the truck, and tells him not to let the Zombots touch him. Shadow says, I know. And Sonic says, if it happens, you should be fast enough to run it off like me. To which Shadow responds, cowards run, I win. Yeah, that seems about on point for Shadow. Let's keep going. Shadow touches base with Omega, giving him some orders on how to contain the situation, leaving Shadow to take on the Zombot horde himself, to which he shoots some lights at him and kicks him with his shoes and flips around, I guess. I don't really know what he's actually accomplishing, but, whatever. We get back to Rouge, who's directing survivors towards the truck, notices that Shadow's making a mess within the middle of the horde, points out that he's being reckless, as we know Shadow to be. Nothing wrong here, nothing whatsoever. And then we get back to Shadow, who is just fighting Zombots, pointing out that they're quite resilient as he's Oh man, he straight up curb stomps a zombie with those sweet kicks of his and gets up with a Picasso face. Being impressed, Shadow decides to show off his sick breakdancing skills and also points out that the metal virus can't infect the ultimate life form. I don't know where he got the data for that, but sure. This is all on the up and up so far, no problems whatsoever. We then get back to Sonic, who is running around on the outskirts of town and pointing out something I don't think have ever seen in the comics, unless I'm mistaken. He's actually getting winded. He takes a quick second to reflect on everything he's lost and wonders if it's his own fault, and then quickly points out to himself that no, he can't be blamed for the actions of others, and then zips back into town. Cut back to Shadow, who is zipping his way through the Zombots again, and then just grabs one, I guess. I don't know why. He just decides, I'm gonna touch this one and throw it into other ones. And wouldn't you know it, he's got some icky goo all over him. Anyway, Shadow now has the infection, and Rouge tells him, run. She and Omega will hold things down from here. And Shadow says, I don't run, and begins to just straight up punch Zombots. Totally in line with everything we know about Shadow so far. No problems here. Omega can't provide backup for Shadow because there are just way too many of them for him to take care of, and, well, once you know it, Shadow gets overtaken by the Horde. Sonic makes his way back into the middle of town, and Rouge tells Sonic to handle Shadow. And Sonic's like, handle? I think you're the only one he listens to, which he clearly didn't. But as Sonic finds out, what Rouge actually meant was that he had to take care of Zombot Shadow. Yeah, totally fine. No problems here. Okay, so before we break down everything we just witnessed, let's carry on through issue 20 first. We're gonna spend most of our time with Sonic versus Zombot Shadow. Sonic quickly overpowers Shadow, pointing out that a healthy Shadow would have seen that move coming and countered it, but now he has to deal with Shadow on top of a bajillion Zombots. They fight for a little bit, and Sonic sends him off into a crowd of Zombots, and Sonic's quickly getting tuckered out. The situation has become completely uncontrollable, so Sonic just tells Rouge to take off, and he'll hold off the Zombots best he can. At this point, Omega jumps into the fray to help out. Or, well, that's what Sonic assumes anyway. Omega's actually here because Eggman robots remain, and this must be corrected violently. Again, read this book for yourself. The way they write Omega is just fantastic. But while they're dealing with all these Zombots, Sonic notices that Shadow isn't there, and then notices... he's chasing after the truck. Just look at this. He just looks like a distracted dog chasing down a car. Like if they'd done it from the perspective of the truck, or like closer to Shadow, like making it really seem scary and dangerous, but it's all in the background. I don't know, maybe it's just me. He just looks ridiculous. Oh my god. Oh, that's great. Sonic does his best to redirect Shadow back into the party, but as he quickly learns, Shadow is not a normal Zombot and chucks Sonic to the side. Omega and Sonic are quickly losing ground here, and Omega points out that Sonic's infection is getting worse and he should run off. Sonic's telling him that he's not going to abandon a friend, and Omega responds that we are not friends. You're in the way of my massacre. I love this robot. Sonic points out the obvious, that Omega's ammo isn't actually getting anything done, so how about they just get out of there while they still have energy? And Omega just flat out refuses, and then grabs Shadow by the face and just smothers his face into the ground like the bad dog he is. Gotta rub his nose in it. Sonic points out, wait, that's Shadow. And Omega's like, nope, he's another robot, don't care. And Shadow responds in kind by just ripping apart Omega. Oh my goodness. Sonic tries to reason with Shadow Zombot, and it's not going well at all. And quickly, Omega is getting torn apart, and Sonic is being overpowered by Shadow and the other Zombots. But thankfully, at the last moment, he's saved by the return of Silver. As you might recall, he was taken out of commission when they first took on Starline, but looks like he's fully recovered, and Tails is with them as well. With his telekinetic abilities, he gets all the Zombots floating around him and clears the way so Sonic can get out of there. Tails in turn picks up the head of Omega, the only thing that remains, but thankfully, that sass is still intact. But Shadow's not having any of it, as he leaps off the side of the building and almost makes contact with Silver. Thankfully, he doesn't, and the two fly boys get right the hell out of there. So, Sonic has gotten the survivors out of there, but at the cost of a couple of allies. They meet up at Restoration HQ, and at this point, it's really Sonic just touching base with all the other surviving main cast characters. Starting off with Cream, who seems to be in decent spirits despite the fact that she recently lost her 2 Chow. She catches Sonic up with what's happening at Restoration HQ, pointing out that there are a lot of refugees and not a lot of room for them, and everyone's kind of in a bummer mood, but she's doing her best with snacks and candies and doing her best to remain happy, so in turn everybody else will be happy as well. She guides Sonic over to Amy Rose's office, and General points out that Sonic is still infected, therefore he's denied access, until Cream scolds him and they let him on through. Amy, who's been recently made charge of Restoration, is clearly in over her head and she's doing her best. Sonic heads over to Rouge, who asks him about Shadow, and Sonic responds, sorry, he's gone. Now that Amy's off the phone, her and Sonic catch up, but the reunion is short-lived as she goes back to the radio, and I guess Echo 3, Echo 13, and Echo 11 went down on Turtle Shell Island. Oh man, I should have named my podcast Turtle Shell Island. I want to go to Turtle Shell Island. Oh, anyway, yeah, Sonic leaves because he's all bummed out. Turns out everything's going pretty garbagey for the entire world. He then runs into Vector and Espio, who have just woken up from their naps. They in turn ask him how he's doing, and Sonic points out that he's taking little naps here and there, but he can't really do much else than that, otherwise the infection's going to take hold of him. They part ways off to find Charmy, as they still don't know what happened to him, even though we know what did. The clearly exhausted Sonic then touches base with Tails and Silver. And now that Silver's awake, there's something Sonic's been wanting to discuss, namely why he's come back from the future again. Sonic points out that Silver had mentioned that his world was all metallic and lifeless, and wonders if this was because of the metal virus. Silver is confident that that is the case, but Sonic doesn't remember Silver mentioning any Zombots. Silver responds that it's because he didn't see any, and he's hoping that that won't be a mystery they have to solve. Sonic then sees how Omega is doing, who's just being a violent head, so he's fine. Tails points out that he can rebuild him, but it's going to take some time because Eggman Tech is notoriously weird. But now we get to the actual point of why Sonic is here, bothering his best bud Tails. Today was a close call. It was probably the worst that Sonic has dealt with in terms of the zombie virus so far, and we have to know if Tails is any closer to finding a cure for this entire mess. Unfortunately, Tails just doesn't have enough data, but he might have a means to collect more. Tails points out that Sonic's speed is somehow combating the metal virus. It isn't completely, but it is consistently holding it back. So he built a nice little biometric sensor that Sonic can wear on his wrist. So basically a Fitbit. Long and short of it, Tails is going to take readings from Sonic while he's running out and about in the world to see if they can find some sort of solution from him. So while everything seems to be going to pot, we might still yet have a chance to beat this thing, which is all the hope Sonic really needs right now. He's kind of desperate for it. He looks really tuckered out. But we end things with Dr. Starline, who we haven't seen for the last couple issues. He sits by himself, somewhat dejected, having to admit to himself that Eggman has no plan to control the virus. They've got some tests scheduled for tomorrow, but Starline still feels like Eggman's overlooked or forgotten one of his many assets. So he digs through his files to see if there's anything that can help get this virus in check, and comes across the Lost World Project. Well, I wonder if anything's going to come from that, and I wonder if we're going to see the return of a fan favorite villain. But that is where we are going to end things in terms of coverage for today. But we're not going to wrap up the episode just yet. I did say at the front that I wanted to wait till the end of the Zombot virus saga before I kind of give my general thoughts on the story altogether. That said, I also pointed out that we would stop at some point to really pick apart and analyze one specific subject. And that subject is Shadow. Because this has been a hot topic for fans for quite a while, and I can't just flat out ignore it, so let's get into it. Okay, so to anyone looking from the outside in, you might be wondering what exactly is the big deal here. If you don't know any better, you just see this guy as another Dark Mirror villain. It's a well-worn trope at this point. Hell, even an expectation. If you have a protagonist, you need to have an evil version of them running around somewhere. And Shadow looks to be just that, or at least that's what your average average person would assume just by taking in his design. And in terms of story, almost everything makes sense here, especially through the lens of tropey zombie fiction. But for longtime Sonic fans, Shadow fans specifically, this felt very out of character. Shadow's actions in this comic goes against a lot of what has been established back in the adventure era of the games. Because let's be real, if you love those games, you probably love Shadow the Hedgehog, because the narrative through line was Shadow. We get to know what makes him tick, uncover his origins and purpose, and most importantly, we get to see him grow as a character, more so than anyone else in those stretch of games. Those are sometimes called the dark ages of the Sonic franchise, and while not a fan of that term, you could take it quite literally, because all of those games revolve around the Dark Hedgehog. Even when he's just a part of the ensemble cast, his narrative is usually the most interesting portion of the game's story. He was the badass new bad guy who turned out to have a lot more going on under that moody exterior. And I've gone on record saying I'm not the biggest fan of the stories told in those games, but I like them well enough to certainly understand why people attached to those projects as passionately as they did. We were in a brave new era of video game storytelling, and for a lot of kids of the day, this was their first taste of more complex characters, plots, and motivations. It's honestly no wonder there are so many fans of this era despite them being as notorious as they were in the wider gaming world. And adventure fans generally focus a lot more on the story than fans of the earlier classic games or later boost games, because the story was a major focus of the adventure games. So it's not much of a surprise many of them would turn to the comics for a more compelling narrative, especially in a time when many of those adventure fans have not been too happy with some more recent game scripts. And that's kind of the point of all these comics. You can't play a comic, you're here because you love these characters, and you want to spend a little more time with them in their world. But that only works when those characters are staying true to, well, their character. And here we have Shadow acting arrogant and reckless, easily one of the most powerful characters in the cast, and he's taken out by grabbing a Zombot? What? He ignores Sonic, he ignores his teammates, and he ignores a lot of his own history in terms of tackling desperate situations, such as this. So yeah, I get why a lot of fans are really upset with this issue. Under all of that dark fur lies the heart of a hero, loyal to a fault, cunning and tactical. Yet here he is, getting taken out from his own sliminess. So yeah, you can understand the frustration. But at the same time, I also get why he was taken out like this. There's a frustrating truth the early 2000 fans are going to have to accept. Shadow has undergone something of a soft reboot. All of these characters have. There's a reason he went from sounding like this.
If the world chooses to become my enemy, I will fight like I always have.
To this.
I see no villains, just some fools whose only ability is wasting time.
Nothing against the voice actor here, but there's an obvious direction Sega is trying to take this character. And I hate to tell you guys, I kind of understand why. Like I said, if you did not know any better, you can make certain assumptions about Shadow's personality from his design. And as a kid's property, I'd get why you'd want to easily identify Shadow and his place in the Sonic cast. The Sonic franchise revolves around Sonic. That might sound weird, but if you go back to the adventure era, I'd argue that those games largely revolve around Shadow. But nowadays, they rely more on Sonic than ever before. It's no longer about Shadow's backstory and character arc. It's now back to Sonic and, well, he's got to play the part of the cool, charming hero and the voice of reason and the guy making all of the plans. And yes, that is a bigger topic for another time. Wait till the end of all of this. But my point is that we are reading a story with the current interpretations of these characters, and unfortunately, the writers of this licensed property have to work within those guidelines. These are not Ian Flynn's characters, and it's entirely up to Sega whether or not they stay true to the pre-established stories or if they take Shadow in a new direction. I only bring this up because I see a lot of people use this issue to yell about Ian Flynn not understanding these characters when we have seen him write Shadow perfectly fine within Archie canon. Yes, every writer is going to have a slightly different spin on this franchise, but at the end of the day, it's up to Sega to determine the overall direction. Flynn's been upfront about this, and no, I don't think he's lying, because that probably wouldn't do well for Sega if he was lying about the company giving him the paycheck. checks. But that does not excuse this book from criticism. Even with these guidelines in place, there's definitely some weak points worth discussing. You're telling me that Shadow didn't jump into the situation without a game plan, doesn't coordinate with the rest of Team Dark, wasn't updated on Sonic's situation and how he's keeping it in check? I mean, I get we get these little scenes with Sonic talking with Shadow and Rouge, and it seems like this is the first time they got the information that him running this stuff off is what's keeping it in check, but it's also kind of inconsistent with the way Shadow reacts to them telling him to run. And I also think it's weird that Tails would call the Chaotix and give them the heads up, but he wouldn't call Team Dark first. Rouge contacted Sonic through a headset and gave him the heads up on Sunset City, so there's clearly been some coordination between all these different factions. So why on earth would they not know about Sonic's infection and how he's handling it prior to him interacting with them? And then Shadow gets infected by grabbing a Zombot? So do his gloves count as organic material? Why wasn't he infected when he was spinballing through them? And yes, I know all of this is nitpicking, alright? I know. But if you're going to spend so much time establishing the rules, then you need to follow your own rules. And I get the point of this. Shadow is too powerful of a character to leave unchecked, so you need to take him off the board if you want to keep raising the stakes for Sonic. But when you're making it blatantly obvious that you're making these situations happen in service to the plot, then you have a little bit of a problem with the script. These are overall just tiny hiccups here and there, but they add up quickly. Like, for real, Rouge knew Shadow was infected completely, and then asked Sonic about Shadow later on in headquarters? Like she didn't see him turn? She told Sonic to go take care of Shadow. Did we forget all of that just so we could see this reaction from Rouge? It's not like he was going to save him or something. So yes, the issue done goofed, because we know that Shadow is a powerful character, and we know we have to get him out of the way. And honestly, when I first read through it, I just rolled with it because I've read so many stories like this, and I knew where they were going with it. But I also have a problem with Zombot Shadow, because yeah, I was expecting Shadow to get infected, and I was expecting a Zombot Shadow fight. And I'll give him this, he was more dangerous of a Zombot than the regular ones, and Sonic probably would have lost if it wasn't for a last minute save from Silver. But I don't know, I kind of felt like there could have been a little bit more done in terms of making Shadow a particularly dangerous type of Zombot. Like yes, we are constantly worried about Sonic turning into a Zombot, but this book is very clearly keeping most of the focus from Sonic's perspective. And even without rocket boots, this would have been a great chance to show how dangerous things could get if Sonic were to turn. They just escaped Sunset City, which is fine. They didn't actually win that battle. But I kind of feel like Shadow should be treated like a next level type of threat. This is the zombie apocalypse of the Sonic universe. The story and the threat itself shouldn't revolve entirely around Shadow. I'm not saying that, but Shadow should be something that Sonic's crew constantly have to worry about. Like they either need to constantly stay on the move because he just covers ground way too quickly, or they are forced into a situation where they have to contain him because Shadow is spreading the virus as quickly as an entire town of Zombots would all on his own. And I'm sure scheduling was tight. Again, the focus is not on Shadow, it's on the Zombot arc, but I don't know. Reading through these last two issues, I kind of felt like the pacing was a little bit off, and we might have spent a little bit too much time reconnecting with all the characters and what they were doing when we could have done that in these next upcoming issues. The storyline does drag quite a bit, and there are definitely some weak spots in these Shadow-centric stories. But if I gotta be honest with you guys, I overall did not have much of a problem with this whatsoever. I've become somewhat used to this interpretation of Shadow, and it's not like he's just gonna be a Zombot forever, and honestly, I don't even think he's gonna be this cranky forever. Also, this probably didn't bother me a whole lot because this is even the worst we've seen of the character.
I am Shadow Android, the ultimate battle life form created by Eggman. You may have created me, Doctor, but I will now lead this empire and androids will rule. This is who I am. What?
It sucks when one of your favorite characters is being reinterpreted in a way that doesn't work for you, especially when they do soft reboots, yet still expect you to keep everything that happened before as canon, but that's kind of what happens with long-running franchises. I'm not saying you just have to grin and bear it. I think it's important to express your frustrations and your criticisms, but I also think it's important where you're expressing them too. Ian Flynn is more than aware that you were not happy with the way Shadow was interpreted. And again, I keep telling you guys, take a listen to the Bumblecast because he has gone on record multiple times saying that he's not too happy with what he's supposed to do with Shadow. That doesn't excuse these scripts. If you don't like them, you don't like them, and that is fine. I know there were some plans to have Shadow take off his containment rings and just go nuts like he did with all the Mephiles copies in Sonic 06, but yeah, ultimately that didn't happen. I've been mulling over this particular topic for quite a while. There's a reason why I did the Super Shadow video when I did, just to kind of point out to you guys that I'd like to think I understand what makes this character so special to everybody, just so when I finally covered this, I wouldn't sound completely off base when I told you I wasn't bothered that much by this story. No, I'm not the biggest fan of this interpretation of Shadow, but at the same time, I also don't want him to be quite as much of a hero as he was in the Adventure era as well. I kind of like a Shadow who is a proper rival to Sonic. I kind of like a little Vegeta in that mix, because I kind of like Vegeta, I'm sorry. But I think there's a middle ground we have not yet struck with this character, and despite all the bashing everyone's done with Sonic Forces, I think it's important to look at how Shadow was interpreted in that game. Again, not quite as well as he was back in the Adventure era, but I definitely think we're moving closer to something that everyone can be happy with. Sega tends to overcorrect when it comes to their games, and I'm hoping that the little more Shadow we're seeing from Forces and from the comics and from the reaction to how Shadow handled this situation, because yes, they do address it, I think all of this is pointing towards the signs that hopefully sooner rather than later, we're going to have a Shadow that can be Sonic's dark rival and at the same time can be his own person, one that we're compelled to follow and enjoy and doesn't feel like an idiot when he's in the middle of a situation like this. I think my actual issue with all of this is just how Sonic is interpreted in the more modern age. Like I said, he's got to be the hero on every level for everybody. It really feels like this entire world revolves around him as opposed to him existing in this larger, grander world, which I kind of miss about the Archie series. I kind of miss Sonic being a little bit of a dick or being a little flippant or rushing too quickly into a situation. I kind of wanted a story that I thought I would get when I saw the cover of this comic book, where we see Team Dark trying to get survivors away from Zombots, and Shadow looks pissed because Sonic doesn't look like he's taking the situation seriously. I mean, there's like 100 different ways you could have Shadow get infected that would have been fine for people. I don't even think he needed to take off his rings. Maybe he's really honestly pissed with Sonic because technically his inaction helped enable this situation. I think that is a great way to have these two characters come at odds with each other, and I would have liked to see more of that play out. I would have loved to see that expanded upon. And when Shadow finally turns, I don't know, you could have had Sonic accidentally bump into him, or Shadow going out of his way to stop Sonic from going fully converted because he knows how dangerous Sonic would be as a Zombot. I don't know, I'm just spitting off the top of my head. I'm not sitting in front of this and I'm just using hindsight, but my point is there was a lot of potential story worth telling between these two characters and a lot of decent excuses to have them be at odds with each other without it sacrificing the core ideals of Shadow that we know so far. But again, I haven't seen Sega's notes. I have no idea what's been said to Ian about the direction of the character. And ultimately, at the end of the day, Shadow is not the most important character in this storyline. And he has, whether you like it or not, stayed pretty consistent for his characterization in the IDW canon. Yes, it's spun off from the main core game canon, but this is still its own story, and Shadow's been a little bit crankier for this past decade, whether you like it or not. So while I'm not the happiest I could be with it, and while I do think there could have been better ways to get to the end goal they were going for, I'm still overall okay with it. It was still a fun, crazy, chaotic mess, and this is where the book really feels like things are about to get really bad, because we're starting to see Sonic get tired and worried and stressed, and I think that would make a bigger impact if he was a lot more flippant and foolish prior to this point, like trying to hold back his own guilt for the situation by being brash and arrogant and all this other stuff we've known Sonic to be in the past. I don't know, I'm sure Ian Flynn has his own hundreds of different ways he would have liked to do this particular story, but again, when you're writing a licensed property, you don't have as many options as you would like. It's a bigger challenge than people give it credit for. Critique this issue, make of it what you will, and yes, if there are ways the writers could have improved even within their own given guidelines, then yeah, I don't think it's too much to ask them to step the game up. Just understand there are guidelines in place. But yeah, that's just gonna about wrap up all my thoughts about this notorious moment in IDW Sonic history. I get why it's there, and I hope I picked it apart well enough that I can validate those frustrations and explain them away, but at the same time, like I said at the start, when I first read through this, I didn't even blink an eye. I thought Shadow kind of went out like a bitch, but I also kind of expected him to go out. So he got some cool hits in, he did some cool extra stuff as a Zombot, and I would have liked more, and I would have liked some stuff done a little bit differently, but at the same time, the overall pressing issue of the Zombot threat is far more interesting to me, and I'm sure that this is just going to be a weak point in the history of Shadow the Hedgehog. This character isn't going anywhere, and whether or not you like a current interpretation of him, just remember that's not always going to be the case. Express your frustrations, express your criticisms, help the writers and the IP holders and everybody else guide these characters in a way that facilitates the fan base, because there's a reason you fell in love with these characters, and honestly, if those reasons shine through, there's no reason they can't build that fan base. But at the same time, don't let it ruin your day. Don't let this silly moment ruin an entire storyline or comic series for you. If this was literally all it took to make you swear off IDW Sonic, well, I'm sorry, you're missing out on a lot of great stories here. And while it might not be true to what games have interpreted Shadow, like literally almost 20 years ago, it still works well enough within the canon provided by the comic books so far. So yeah, not my favorite thing in the world, but ain't gonna ruin my day. And yeah, I'm sick and tired of talking about this, so we're gonna wrap it up, and I will catch you next time on Sonic Speed Reading. Toot toot, Sonic Warriors!